Begin the current Daf Masech Shabbos Daf Mem Zayin. Begin on the second line down with the top of the Yamid, where our shiur continues in the theme from the previous Daf regarding that of Muktzah and of Bosses. Our shiur is co-sponsored by Kal Zechin Yecheskel, Torah Anytime, and Daf Achaim. We appreciate everyone joining us on Zoom. Some ideas we're going to be speaking on today's Daf is, as we mentioned, continuation from what's called Bosses L'Dava Asr. So we were speaking about many different types of Muktzah. There's Muktzah Machmas Gufa, intrinsically Muktzah. There's Muktzah Machmas Issa because of prohibition related to it. There's Muktzah Machmas Mis because it's disgusting. Then there's something that is not really Muktzah, but it's a base for something prohibited. So you could have the leichter that may not necessarily be something that it's a Muktzah item itself, or a plate or a platter, but the shalhebes, the flame is a dava, so that makes the thing supporting it as also Muktzah because now you can't move because there's a base for that. Additionally, we're going to be discussing regarding reassembling kelim that are made of parts. What's the halacha? Is that a problem on Shabbos or not? Is that chayav b'chatas because of baino or makav patish? Additionally, we're going to speak about what's called gram kibui, which is if, let's say, you're not directly putting out a fire, but indirectly causing a fire. What's that halacha and how that relates to a halacha in the Mishnah? Then we're going to start the next parak hatmana, which discusses the idea of which the translation is insulating a pot in another element, which that's going to depend on if it's meisav hevel or not meisav hevel. So some of the ideas we're going to be speaking about, the actual terms and concepts. Like we said, you could have a basis al davar ha'aser, where all this is all supporting one thing, the shalheves. So therefore that's muktzah. But then what's it if, let's say, something a base, what's called a davar ha'aser ula davar mutter. It's supporting, let's say, a rock, which is a muktzah thing, but it also has inside the basket things that are permitted, fruits, vegetables, that we'll see if that halacha is different. Additionally, a very important concept called grav shel rei, which is a basket of excrement, which is like basically a portable a potty or a bathroom. What's the halachic status of that basket in regards to moving muktzah items? Additionally, a concept we mentioned in the previous stuff regarding mevata kli me'echanei. Are you allowed to move a vessel that will then have something muktzah come on it, and then it's going to make it that it can't be moved from its place? And additionally, like we mentioned, the term gram kibui, which is to indirectly cause a flame to be extinguished. Then, when we start the next parak, the concept of atmana is a isad rabbanan. There's two types of atmana. There's something called davar she'eina meisav hevel. It's something that you're wrapping it, you're insulating it, something that does not increase the heat. And then there's something called davar meisav hevel. You're insulating it in something that increases the heat. If it doesn't increase the heat, so on Shabbos you're not allowed to insulate it, but erev Shabbos you're allowed to. But if something that increases the heat, as it's insulating, is increasing the level of the heat of the food, then you're not allowed to do it not on erev Shabbos and not on Shabbos Kodesh. So that way we begin. Daf Mem Zayin, second line from the Yomit. Amr Reb Zera, Amr Basi, Amr B'Yechanan, Amr B'Chanina, Amr Reb Reimanos. So this is they're all quoting from what Reb Reimanos had said. He says, Li hit the Rebbe. He says, Rebbe permitted me, and it's going to be important what this exact case is, but we'll translate what the words are. He permitted me l'taltel machta, to move a pan of incense, of levina, be'afara, with its ashes. So you see, this is the picture, this is the pan, and it has the ashes inside of it. Now, the reason why that's such an important picture is because to understand what the case is talking about. It sounds very simple and innocuous, but it's not so simple what the case is. The Gemara's assumption right now means when he permitted me to move this pan, which that's what they would do, they would fire it up, and you had the incense, it would have a good aroma, they'd pass it around, it had a good smell. But the assumption right now is, when it says they permitted me to move the pan with the ashes, be'afara means with the ashes. What does that mean? He permitted me with the ashes. What does that mean? He had to permit me to move the pan even though it had the ashes inside? Because the ashes, at least the Gemara, the way it's understanding right now, is muktzah. This has no utility. It's a leftover. When the incense burns out, turns into ashes. So this has no utility. Just like when you eat an egg, the shells are muktzah, has no utility. When you eat a nut, the shell has. So here also, this ashes is muktzah. They didn't need it. And that's what Rabbi Shloimy is teaching a chiddush, that Rebbe said that since this pan has a what's called a Torah's Kli Aleha, which we mentioned in the previous Daf, this has halachic status of a vessel. A vessel is not muktzah. You could use a kli for whatever you want to use on Shabbos. So even though it has the ashes on it, which is muktzah, still okay. But this is a pan. I could use a pan. Even though it has the ashes on it, he let me move it. That's the case. Again, that was basically this is what the question is going to be. basically, even though this is a basis l'davar aser, Rebbe permitted me to move it. On that, so this was Reb Zeru who said the name of Rabasi, who said the name of Rabbi Yechanan, who said the name of Chanina, who said that what Rabbi Nunus had said. And that in this chain, the last chain, normally Reb Zeru Rabasi, Reb Zeru who said the name of Rabasi, Reb Zeru asked Rabasi, Mi Omer Rabbi Yechanan Hachi, who Rabasi had said the name of Rabbi Yechanan. So he's asking him, who he heard from him, did Rabbi Yechanan really say this in the name of Rabbi Nunus, that you're allowed to move this pan with the ashes inside? Yeah, okay, I get the pan as a kli, but it's a basis davar aser. But we're going to ask from Rabbi Yechon himself. We'll learn the Mishnah later on, Kuf Mamal from Abayz, that says the following halacha. Neitel adam b'nai. So a person could carry his son, even though the even b'yadai, even though the son has a rock in his hand, so the rock is muktzah, and if you're picking up the son is holding the muktzah, it doesn't make a difference. You can lift up the son. Now the main thing we're going to ask from is the next case, which is very similar, but oikel kala, or a basket, you're allowed to lift up a basket on Shabbos, v'evan b'teicha. So even though the basket has a rock inside of it, doesn't make a difference. You can lift up the basket, but don't stop yet. They say listen to the rest of the story. And that's who we're asking on. This first teaching of this was in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, but Rabbi Yechanan qualified that Mishnah, and he said, wait a second, it's not just a basket with a stone inside of it, it's b'kakola malay peris askinan. Besides having the rock inside of it, says Rabbi Yechanan, you can't just move a basket with a rock inside of it. Let me explain you the case. Besides the rock, there were also fruits inside. So it says the Gemara like this. Time of this beperi, so you're telling me the reason why you're allowed to move the basket with the rock inside because it had fruit inside of it. Hales beperi, you tell me if there was no peris, that lie. That you're not allowed to move the basket. You know why? Because that vessel became a basis, a base for the rock. And it becomes secondary to the rock. And therefore it nullifies the quote Torah's clear the status of a vessel of this being considered a basket, a vessel. So here also I don't understand. How could you be able to quote this teaching? What do you mean? The pan becomes a basis, a base to the ashes. Whatever's on top of something, especially if it's a vessel, is the primary thing. Now, Rabbi Yechanan we know holds like Rabbi Yehuda, which is the more severe interpretation of muktzah. So therefore for the machta should be the same thing. It's not just that like he's interpreting the Mishnah. He obviously holds like that. So how can we understand that he said that he's quoting this halacha from Rebbe, that you're allowed to move the pan with the ashes, but that's a basis, l'davar ha'aser. Just like over here, he agrees you can't just hold a basket with a rock inside of it. It becomes a basis of ha'aser. He only lets it when it's a basis, l'davar ha'aser v'hamuter. So on that, says the Gemara, ishtoimim k'shachad, Rabasi, who was asked the question, it's like quoting a pasuk in Daniel, which says these words. He was silent for a moment. He was thinking, it's a good question. How could he allow a basal dava aser when Rabbi Yechanan himself only allows when there's a basal dava aser v'amot? And he says, hachanami, I got a good answer. Here also by that story to reminisce, the ispa kratin, there were still some leftover granules of the incense in the pan that were left over from when you had burnt up the incense. The lavaina is still fit to use to smell. So because it's secondary to the incense, that's why you're allowed to move the pan with the ashes. Because now it's exactly like the other case of a basket full with produce and the rock inside of it. It's a basus l'davar ha'aser v'hamuter. So that's exactly like the case. Yes, that's why you're allowed to move it. Because a basus l'davar ha'aser hamuter, you're allowed to move. But on that, Abaya asks, he says, wait a second, how could that be making this pan into a basis l'davar hamuter, besides the l'davar aser, but the muter because of the incense? But this, remember, where did the story take place? This was in the house of Rebbe. Remember, it said that Rebbe let me move this. This is obviously in Rebbe's household at one of the meals. He let me move the pan on Shabbos with the ashes and with the leftover incense. But Kratan Bey Rebbe, if you just have some granules left over in the house of Rebbe, who he was the nasi, he was the leader, he was a wealthy person, Micha Shivi, are they significant to even say that this is secondary to it, to make it a basis to a quote davar hamuter? But this is not significant. And therefore, this wouldn't make it as secondary to this. This wouldn't be considered. All you would say it's secondary to is the ashes. It would only be a basis l'davar aser, not l'davar aser v'hamuter. And then Abaye says, wait a second. And Bechitim, if you're going to say, well, okay, but wait a second. So you're right. For Rebbe, maybe it's not significant. But Chazul Aniyim, paupers, they would be excited. You see that leftover cigarette. People are, whoa, look what you see there's a little bit, some of that krutten left over, so maybe it is significant, maybe not for Rebbe, but for poor people, so that should make it a basal daba asa v'amutim. So no, because Vatanya learned the Brisa that it goes depending on the person. And this is in the context of laws of Tumah. The Brisa says, Big Dianim, the garments of paupers, which has a smaller measurement regarding what a beged is considered, even if it's just 3 by 3 finger breadths, or let's say when they have the threads that are very thick and coarse, so that's considered garment la'anim for the paupers regarding the laws of Tumah, which Taisa explains from Rabbeinu Tam. That's specifically regarding the laws of Tumah's measures, but for the laws of Tumah, it's going to be a smaller measurement for poor people, because for them it's significant even though it's small. Big Ashirim, the garments of the wealthy, which is only considered a significant swath of cloth, only if it's at least 3 by 3 hand breadth, then it's considered garment la'ashirim for wealthy people and for sure for the poor people. But one thing we see from that brisa is that the garments danim of paupers la'ashirim for wealthy people loy is not considered a beged, a garment for them, and it's not going to be kabul tumah. Because for the wealthy person, it's not considered a beged, even though for a poor person it would be. Seirosa, by the house of Rebbe, these krutten are insignificant. So how could you say in the house of Rebbe that he permitted to move it because Rebbe was telling him it's a basal dava aser v'hamutra because of the ashes and the krutten? That can't be the case. Because Rebbe would never have permitted in his house, these krutten are insignificant. This can't be that the pan was secondary to the granules, those few insignificant granules, is not even considered as anything. And therefore, since it's not significant, you can't say the pan is secondary to it. Therefore, it's only secondary to the pan. We're back to the question. If it's a basal dava aser, how could he have permitted to move it if it's forbidden because of the laws of a basis? So Elam Abai, rather Abai gives a different interpretation. He says that they permitted him to move the pan bi'afara. You know why you can move it with the ashes? Because the ashes are repulsive to see. Just like, the shrayim over here, the oisgebrente incense. So midi to have a graf. It's going to be similar to a graf, which is an earthenware vessel that's prepared to be shalrei. It's prepared to hold excrement. Basically a portable toilet. The Bryson teaches Masechtas Beis Daf Lamavav Mabeis that you're allowed to take it out to the garbage into the courtyard because it's disgusting. So although really it should be muktzah, obviously there's no utility for it, but to the contrary, the sages who made the laws of muktzah, they said when it's something so disgusting and repulsive, we don't want it around the whole Shabbos, then you're allowed to go ahead and take it out. So here also, that's why you're allowed. So it's actually to the contrary. Yeah, of course it's muktzah, but since it's like a graf sharei, therefore you could take it out. And the Adam Rabbi says, Shtei Trubis B'Dav. He says there's two difficulties with your interpretation. Chada, first of all, graf sharei, a pot of excrement, of waste matter, is moist, is repulsive. V'hai, here the pan, moist, it's not repulsive. Some ashes is repulsive. It's not repugnant. It's maybe not, you don't like, let's say you have some shells on the table. Oh, it's disgusting? Not disgusting, maybe you don't like them, but it's not disgusting. It's not like a waste matter. It's not filth. And moreover, graf sharei migli. When you have a pot of excrement, it's uncovered. The high here, the pan, is mixi, it's covered. As Rashi explains, all their machtas, their pans were covered, and there were little holes on the top to get the smell out from the thing. And therefore that's not the case over here. And therefore, since it's covered, you shouldn't call it a graf sharei. So rather, Elam Rabba, he gives a third interpretation. He gives an example to explain how he's going to interpret this halacha. He says, Kevin Rav Nachman. Rabbi says, when we were by the yeshiva of Nachman, and the halacha follows like this: have metaltalinon kenuna. We remove this kenuna. Now, what's kenuna? Kenuna is a copper vessel that you bring a fire. They say host eish, host fire. So they would bring in front of the nobility the fire in this copper vessel to warm themselves up with. That's what this kenuna was. So he says we used to move this kenuna agav kitme. What does it mean, agav kitme? Kitme means ashes. Meaning that there were ashes in this kenuna, because that's what they used to have a fire, a pan of fire, and obviously there's a source over there that gets burnt up, and then you have the ashes over there. So he says that on Shabbos, we knew we're going to need ashes. Why are we going to need ashes? Because they needed people to spit, or there's some excrement, and some other times the floors were made out of earth, so you would have to use it to cover it. So then, wait a second. Why would it be prohibited to hold a pan? Is not prohibited, and ashes. If you're thinking about it from before Shabbos, you prepared it, mentally prepared it. So it's also not muktzah. What's the chiddush? Or the chiddush is that the avagav de'ikolel shivrei eitzim. Although this kenuna that Rav Nachman permitted us to move, that it had broken pieces of wood which are muktzah, because that has no utility. still he permitted us to move the pan because of the ashes that we needed. So you have to listen to how Rashi explains how Rav is reinterpreting this halacha of Reb Reminis. He's saying it's a totally different case. When he said that he permitted us to move, the Rebbe permitted me to move a machta be'afara, a pan with its ashes, it's not like we had originally thought. That even though it has the ashes with it, and it's a basus l'davar ha'aser, still he permits us to move it, which we had a difficulty. Wait a second, basus l'davar, how could you move it? Oh, maybe it has something mutter with it, but no, that can't be the case either. Also can't be the case. No. He's reinterpreting. He says, when it says machda ba'afara, what it means to say, he permitted me to move the pan because of the ashes, which we needed. And we thought about it from before Shabbos, because we needed to cover the spit or some waste matter, which it's a davar heter. So that's the chiddush, to say that even though it has broken pieces of wood, we consider this kinuna, we consider this machta as just as the same case that we brought from a birchen and the basket that has inside of it fruits and the rock inside of it. Which this actually the halacha l'maisa, when you have something that's a basis, a base, something prohibited and permitted, which we had the case of, let's say, the rock and the fruits. And here too, the way he's reinterpreting it, let's say first what he brought from Reb Nachman, that he had a story which he was bringing light to how to explain this case, that when they needed the ashes, which is davar mutter, but even though it has broken pieces of wood, so too, that was the exact case that was permitted by the machta, where they needed the ashes, that even though it has, let's say, like broken pieces of wood inside of it, that's going to be permitted because it's something that's called a basis l'davar aser v'hamutter. Now, the Gemara, however, asks and says meisve. The Gemara asks under Rav Nachman's teaching that says even though there's broken pieces of wood, that means to say even though it's a basis l'davar ha'aser, but you're allowed to move it because also basis l'davar hamutter because you needed the ashes, from the following brayso. The brayso says v'shavin. They agree. Who's they? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. That we have their dispute by a ner yashin, by an old lamp, which is muktzah machmas miyas. Yehuda says it's aser, Shimon says mutter. Says the brayso, yeah, but they both agree, even though let's say Rabbi Shimon is generally more lenient. Shem yeshba shivrei pesila, but let's say this old lamp, it's not just an old lamp, it also has broken pieces of a wick inside of it. She'aser l'taltal. Then you're now allowed to go ahead and move that lamp. Now, what's this case? The Gemara is presuming and interpreting the brayso like this. In this old lamp, there's oil, and there's a broken wick. Now, the broken wick has no utility. That's muktzah. That's a basis l'davar ha'aser. But the lamp also has inside of it oil, which if anything you would think maybe is more primary. And actually the laws of basis l'davar ha'aser hamutter actually requires that the davar hamutter is more chashiv than the davar ha'aser. So I don't understand. Why is this brayso saying that everyone agrees it's going to be forbidden to move this lamp? Because it has inside of it the broken wick, but it also has inside of it the oil. And you told me that if it's basis l'davar ha'aser v'hamutter, you're allowed to move it. How could Rav Nachman have permitted them to move this kinuna because they wanted the ashes inside of it? So it's a basis l'davar mutter, but it's also basis l'davar aser has the shivrei eitzim. Why is it different than the shivrei psil over here in the lamp? So Mabayi says b'gli l'shanu. That brayso is talking about the Galilee. What's significant about the Galilee? So by them, the broken piece of wick was considered very significant, more so than the oil. Why? So actually, it's a machlokes Rashi and Taisus. Rashi says because they didn't have many garments of linen. So therefore, if you get a broken piece of wick, which is made out of linen, was significant for them. So therefore, it's not like batal, it's not nullified. And to the contrary, the lamp becomes a basis only to the broken piece of wick, because it's the more chashiv of the two. And the contrast to Kenuna, which the more important thing that they wanted was the ashes, that was more important than the shivrei eitzim. Taisa says differently. He brings Rabbi Nutam that no, it actually seems like in the Galilee they actually had a lot of linen. He says no, because they had so much oil, the oil was insignificant to them. So therefore, although there's these two elements here, what we're saying it's a basis, l'davar ha'aser v'hamutter, which is the broken piece of wick, and to the oil, the broken piece of wick is aser, it's a muktzah item. The oil you have utility, you could use on Shabbos, that's a basis l'davar mutter. But, and Rashi and Taisa basically saying the same thing, just it could either go up or down, either that because the oil was so insignificant for them, so the davar mutter wasn't a basis to it, or because that the wick was so important to them because linen they didn't have, So that was more chashiv. So basically, but it was a basis l'dav ha'aser, not l'dav ha'aser v'amota, because the wick was the more chashiv of the two. So it's a basis l'dav ha'aser. But you're right. If it was equal, all things being said, then actually, if the dav ha'muta was more chashiv and it has a dav ha'aser inside of it, like the kakalava evan b'toich, and you have Paris, then actually you would be permitted to move it. It's not difficult on Rav Nachman. How can you move the kinuna agav kitma even though it has shiur eitzim? Because there the ashes are more chashiv, in contrast over here where the wick, the broken piece of wick was more chashiv, therefore it's a bus is only the davar aser, not a davar aser v'muta. Now we continue back to a discussion we had from the previous daf. We had regarding the menorah. This was on daf mem hey. We had that you're not allowed to move the menorah. Why not? Why can't you move the menorah? We're even saying, even the court of Shimon, you can't move the menorah. Why? Not because of muktzah, simply because of mesakin, of you're going to be fixing it, making a makab patish, making a kli. So that's why you can't move the menorah. So going back to that discussion, because we said if it's going to fall down, you're going to put it back together again. So the Gemara has a discussion regarding reassembling the kalim that are made of parts. So the Gemara brings a story that Levi Bar Shmuel, Ashkechinu l'Rab Abba or Rav Huna bar Chia. Not really a story so much, but he encountered Rab Abba and Rav Huna bar Chia. That they were by the entryway of the house of Rav Huna. And he asked them the following question: what's halacha? Could you put back a bed of tarsiim? That's the coppersmith or the weavers, where they would go from city to city to do their work, and they would carry with them a bed made out of parts because they had to always sleep, and they always were. It's an easily assembled bed. What's halacha? Could you put that bed back together again b'Shabbos and Shabbos? So you have machlokes. Amruli, they said to him, Shaper dummy, that's okay, because as we'll see later on, actually the Gemara is going to explain, it's loosely made, and therefore it's not really assembling something. There's a big discussion regarding different things that when kids play on Shabbos. It's not building something. It's meant to take apart and put back in. It's not putting in so tightly. So that's okay. You're not really making something. But Asla Kamed Rabbi Yehuda came in front of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar, he says, they both say, if someone puts back together this bed of the tarsim on Shabbos, he's chayiv achatas. He's liable for karma chatas. Why? Because you just finished off something and you made it clean. You made a bed. So you're chayiv for makab patish, which is a av malacha. Whenever you finish off something, it's considered the av malacha makab patish. Now, as Rashi says, it's not because of binyan, because you built something. Because the halacha is there's no binyan by kalim. Binyan is only by a house, an edifice. This is a kli, which is a bed. But you're going to be chayiv achatas for makab patish. So therefore, that's why they disagree. Now, but Meisvi, the Gemara asks from the following brisa on the first opinions, from those two Amaram that said it is permitted to put it back together again from a brisa. Up until now, it's a machlekes Amaram. Rabbi Shmuel say it's aser, and these other Amaram said it's mutter. Problem is, there's a brisa that says hamachzer kanei menorah. Someone puts back together again the stems of a menorah, meaning there's many different branches coming out to light lamps on top of those branches, and they're taken out. And when necessary, you put them back in. Depends how many people you need a light for. So if someone puts back together the branches of a menorah, b'Shabbos and Shabbos, it's chayav achatas. You're making a kli. Kana sayadin, a similar case. Let's say there was the branches of those who would plaster, those who would whiten the house with plaster. So they had these parts, these branches of the stick that had different pieces, and at the end was this shmata, was this piece that they would soak in lime, and then they would smear the house to plaster the house. Now, when he would be plastering a lower down part of the roof, so he wanted the stick to be very short. But when he would go higher and higher up on the roof, then he had to add on more pieces to go out and make it longer that he could reach higher up. So on that says the brisa, so these kanim, these pieces of the plaster, lo yagzer, you know, put them into the stick. The next, if you do put it back, so putter, you're going to be exempt, because that's not considered finishing off a vessel, because you constantly take it up, put it in, put it out, put it in, put it out. You're not finishing the vessel by adding the piece. So you're exempt, avalasa, but still rabbinically forbidden, because it is very similar to makab patish, so therefore you're not allowed to. Now, another case. So far we spoke about the menorah, we spoke about that there it's going to be chayav achatas. We spoke about by the plasters, so their sticks are pater aval aser, because it's not really finishing off something. It's meant to be taken in and put back in. Rabbi Shloimy, he brings a different case. He talks about these two cases of a horn that's round and a straight horn, which both of these, this keren agula and keren pshuta, were two types of, they were instruments, which was they had holes in these horns, and they were had many holes like a sieve, and in those holes they would put pipes. So you could think of it like some type of a bagpipe instrument, but it would make many different sounds, and it was an instrument. So now Rabbi Shloimy says, the keren agula, the horn that's round, so that, although it sounds similar, but that was a more professional job to do, and you had to really stick in those pipes very tight into the holes, very strong. So that's considered a malacha, because that's meant to stay over there, and therefore chayiv. If you stick in that pipe that you put in those pipes over there, you're going to be chayiv. But keren pshuta, the straight horn, which when you put it in, you have a lot of room, and it's very normal to take it in, take it out. It's not like a big deal. That's how they always do with that instrument. So then putter. So you're not supposed to, but if you do, you're going to be exempt, because again, that's not finishing it off. That's easy. You put it in, take it out. It's not meant to always stay over there. Which these are the important halachas that regarding constructing a table. Oh, you're putting in the leg. This leg comes in, comes out. That's these halachas as it relates to this. But one thing the Gemara is asking from that the first case you described regarding the pieces of the menorah, you said that you're going to be chayiv. Wait a second. That's exactly like the case of the mita shel tarsim, of the bed of the tarsim, where although this is meant to be taken in, taken out, like we said, that you're going to put in as many stems as you need of the menorah, depending on, let's say, what's going on for that event. But you said if you put it in, you're going to be chayiv achatas. So why is that any different than the bed of tarsim? It's not like a little toy that you meant to. You put it in if you need it for that night. It's obviously not falling off when you're sleeping that whole night. So those meant to take in, take out. So why is it any different than the kanei menorah, which you say you're going to be chayiv? Here also you should be chayiv achatas. How could they say that it's going to be mutter? Says the Gemara, you're right. This brisa is not like them. But inhu, meaning this Reb Abba and Rav Huna bar Chia, the Amr ki haytana. They're saying like a different Tana, like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg that we're going to quote, that actually says it is mutter likatchila, which is the Tana like in the brisa. Mal b'nois hamita, the sockets of the bed, which are like these small little legs that have a socket, a place to receive, and you put the bottoms of the legs of the bed, because in Talmudic times the floors were made out of earth, and it would get rotted from the floor, the moisture of the floor. So you have these some people still have things like that you put underneath to hold the bottom of the leg. Where in Talmudic times it was that it shouldn't rot. Or v'karas amita, or the legs of the bed, or ulevachim shel sekivas, which is like the small piece of wood, like a board, which you put in tight into the bow when you're doing archery, that it helps guide the arrow. All these different things, the sockets of the bed, or the legs of the bed, or these crossbow nuts of the bow, lo yachzir. You're not allowed to put these things back into these places. Now, the next, if you do put it back, you putter, because it's the norm to. It's not like what we said, gemar kli. It's like those other cases. You're going to be putter. But as we continue tam and beis, aval asur. But it's prohibited midrabanan because of, like again, it might get confused like a regular kli, which is going to be makav pater. That's meant to stay there. It's like finishing it off. Now, but this is the main point that this machlok is Tanakama. The Tanakama says, okay, but v'lo yitka. But although he said if you put it back, you're not going to be chayav achatas, but you're not allowed to push it in strongly by nailing it in. Vimtaka, but if you really push it in tight, chayav achatas, because that's now it's lodged over there forever. Now it's makapadas. Now you finished it off. If you get that crossbow nut and it's tight into the thing, it's stuck over there, then you can be chayav achatas. Now, Shmuel he says, no, you rough, and this is what they're saying, they're like that Tana. If it was loose, then mutter, then it's going to be permitted. So that's like his Tosfos explains, that what we see the machlokes is that one opinion says that no, even when you do it loose, it's still rabbinically prohibited, because it's similar to the case of you might come to put it in tight. What we see from Shimon Gamliel is that he holds that no, roughly is mutter. And therefore the same thing is going to be the mitzvah shel tarsiyim, that they said that you're allowed to go ahead and reassemble on Shabbos because you put in loosely. So the bed, it has like a hole like this, and you put in the legs, so it's like a loose type of a bed. And therefore, since you're putting it loosely, it's actually going to be even mutter. So you're right. Although you brought me a Tana that says the kanei menorah might be the same thing. Also, you have those candelabras. That's like you got those shamash on some people's menorahs. Like you put the stick in, and it's like this. So although you're putting it in, okay, but this thing, it comes in and out, what I do already, so that's not a big deal. So that's the machlokes. If it's rafoi, we have one opinion that holds it's going to be aser, al kapanim. And as we see by the Kanei Menorah, that if it's, let's say, it's put in tight, it's going to be chai v'chatas. But their whole, like the bracer, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, it says no, if it's rafoi, like the mita shel tarsim, it's a little bit loose, then it's going to be mutter, and therefore it's not difficult on them. Now, the Gemara just ends off the discussion by saying a story. Bei Rav Chama have a mita Galilean nasa. In the house of Rav Chama, they had this Galilean bed, which is similar to this mita shel tarsim, which have a mahadri le b'yemitava. In the house of Rav Chama, they would reassemble it on Yom Tov. Oh, the guests are coming, the son-in-laws and daughter-in-law, they come, they needed more beds, so they didn't prepare the porta crib and all these different things before Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, they would assemble this Galilean bed. So Amalei, who murdered Rabban the Rabbah. So one of the rabbis said to Rav, and some say the Girsa should be Rav Chama because it was in his household. But be that as it may, asked, "My taitach, what's your understanding? Why you let them open up this Galilean bed on Yom Tov itself? What? Because Binyamin Hatzaru? Is it because it's like an indirect type of a building? Because the bed that you assemble is not tightly put in, so therefore he's calling it min hatzad. In other words, because it's something not the norm, it's not a regular assembling. But nehidi sur deraisa like, although it's not biblically prohibited, but it's sur rabbanim, but it's still rabbinically forbidden. And that Amalei says, no, I'm not kosher really. Right. There are some Tanaim that say that you're not allowed to assemble something even though it's loose. But how Rabbi Shimon Leil, the one that it says, it was loose, then it's actually even permitted, and therefore since assembling this bed, you take the frame, the mattress, and you put these legs on, and it's like this loose bed, and the daughter-in-law is saying, why do I get this bed? But the point is, you could go ahead and put this bed because it's loose. That's why it's even permitted to do that on Yom Tov, and that's actually halacha l'maisa. If something is loose, then it's not a problem about makah b'patas. Continuing with the next Mishnah. The Mishnah continues on the theme of Ner, which was the theme that we were discussing when we were talking about muktzah, about a lamp, an old lamp, a new lamp. So we continue on that theme, and we had quoted this halacha in the previous daf, and this is the halacha l'maisa actually. Noisnin kli tachas an area. You're allowed to put a vessel beneath a lamp, the kabbanetzaitis, because there's sparks coming out, you don't want it to just fly all over. So you're allowed to put a vessel beneath to accept the sparks. But, you're not allowed to put into that bowl water, because that's extinguishing. When the sparks are going to come into the bowl of water, it's going to be extinguishing, which kibur is a malacha deraisa. So you're not allowed to put the bowl with water beneath it. I'll put a bowl, but not a bowl with water. Now the Gemara asks on the Reisha, how can you put the bowl beneath the sparks, but you're nullifying the vessel from its preparedness when you put it beneath that lamp? Why? Because now you can't move this bowl anymore for Shabbos because it becomes a base to the nitzaitis, to the sparks. And should we say that refutes Rav Chizda, who we quoted him previously in the parak of Megillah Manav, that he says, now nullify a vessel from its preparedness. You might recall what the Gemara's answer is, because we said this already on that daf, we asked Rav Chizda. But the Gemara is asking it here on this Mishnah again, and now nullify a vessel from its preparedness. He says, no, sparks have no substance once they go out. And therefore you're allowed to move these quote-unquote sparks or the bowl because there's no substance to it anymore, and therefore it doesn't become basas to any davar asa because there's no davar asa over here. The sparks are not significant. So therefore it's not being mevatel kli mechana. Then the Mishnah went on to say, okay, so you're allowed to put the bowl, but what you cannot do is you cannot put water into the bowl that you're putting beneath, because you're going to be extinguishing with the water. I mean, when you have a bowl, you're not extinguishing, it goes out when it hits it, but water, it goes and extinguishes, as we'll shortly explain actually in Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. But first says the Gemara, Leimitnan Stama. Shall we say that this anonymous Mishnah is Kribiesi? Why? Because the Amar, he says later on, Perikol Kisvei HaKodesh, he says that Gairim Lekibui, if you just cause extinguishing, you're only indirectly causing extinguishing, you're not extinguishing, that Atzah is forbidden, because there the Mishnah teaches a Machlokes. Tanakama says you're allowed to make a barrier with any type of vessel, whether it's full or empty, so that the fire shouldn't, let's say there's a fire chas v'shalom, and you want to prevent it from going further. So Tanakama says you can make a barrier of vessels, whether it's full with things or not, and whatever happens, you're not extinguishing. But he says no, you can't take a specific case of new earthenware vessels that are filled with water. Why? Because what's going to happen? We know that those vessels cannot contain the heat. They're going to burst, they're going to extinguish the fire, and since it's garam kibui, it's going to indirectly cause it to extinguish it, that's forbidden. So isn't that what our Mishnah is talking about? Our Mishnah is saying the same thing. You're not extinguishing when you put the vessel with water beneath it. You're causing, indirectly, it's going to cause it to go out. So we see that the Stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Yossi. Says the Gemara, is that logical to say? When did Rabbi Yossi say it's forbidden to do such a thing? That's b'Shabbos, on Shabbos itself. But be'erev Shabbos, but before Shabbos, like here, you're putting the water in the vessel beneath the lamp from before Shabbos. Mei Amar, did he say that such a gram kibbutz would be forbidden? It's only at Shabbos itself that he doesn't let that. And he would talk about an erev Shabbos. And says the Gemara v'chitim, and if you're going to say, no, hachanami. He wrote the halacha of our Mishnah that says that you now put water into the vessel that's beneath the lamp was b'Shabbos, was saying on Shabbos, and it's like Rabbi Yossi. But Vatanya will in the Brayso said, no, that even the halacha of our Mishnah is even on erev Shabbos. And if you're going to compare it to quote gram kibbutz causing extinguishing, then our Mishnah is not even going to be like Rabbi Yossi, because erev Shabbos, Rabbi Yossi does not say his halacha; he only says it on Shabbos. How do we know that our Mishnah is even talking about that erev Shabbos? Because the Brayso says noisin kli tachas aner. It says the two halachas of our Mishnah. It says noisin kli tachas aner lekabel netzitzes b'Shabbos. You're allowed to put this vessel beneath the lamp to catch the sparks, to put the bowl there even on Shabbos. Now the intzarch lamp be'erev Shabbos, and you don't have to say that you're allowed to put the bowl beneath the sparks on erev Shabbos. Now, but the seif of our Mishnah, the Brayso explains, and when we said the loyit and l'teichamayim, you not put water into that bowl, because it's going to cause extinguishing of the flame, is even me'erev Shabbos, you now put the water into the bowl. You don't have to say you now put the water in Shabbos. So back to the question. Who is the Mishnah like? It's not even like Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi, all he holds gram kibbutz also is on Shabbos. He was saying you now put the water into the bowl even from before Shabbos. So Elam Ravashi, rather Ravashi concludes, he says, no, Afilat Tamer, actually you could even say the halacha of our Mishnah is like the Rabbanan. Because it's not similar to that Mishnah in Perkol Kisvei HaKodesh to gram kibbutz, to indirectly causing extinguishing. When the fire is going to hit the vessel, so then the flame is going to cause the barrel to burst, and that's just like a gram of ba'alma, just indirectly causing. But here, Shani Hacha, here it's different. When you put the water into the bowl beneath the lamp, you are literally causing it to extinguish it. The way Rashi explains, we'll explain shortly in a second, the way Taisa says. But Rashi holds it, you're putting the water into the bowl, you are literally extinguishing it, and therefore we make a gzeira that you can't even do it from before Shabbos because you might come to do it on Shabbos. And if you're going to do it on Shabbos, then they should mekarv es kibuye. You're making the time of the extinguishing come closer explicitly. It's like you're literally putting it out. So if you would do it on Shabbos, when you put the water there, you're going to cause it a moment beforehand to go out. When the spark is coming, it's going to hit the water. You're causing it with water to extinguish, and that's what it's explicitly made for. As the place can talk about, you're allowed to have a leichter with water inside, and it's gram kibbutz. So no, that's not what it's meant for. But here, when you're putting the water, it's meant to put it out, and it's going to cause it a second before it hits the plate to go out. Rashi calls that kibbutz mamish. So since on Shabbos, if you do it, it would be literally mechaba. So therefore, we made a gzeira that you're not allowed to do it even on erev Shabbos. Now, Taisa explains differently. Taisa says, no, something more active in the sense. He says, no, on Shabbos, you might come literally to extinguish it, because what happens is, if you have the water in the bowl beneath it and you see the sparks flying, you might come to lift up the vessel when the sparks are falling down, because you're like, oh, the sparks are coming, and it might catch on fire and flammable, and you lift up the bowl, and there's a water inside, so you might literally be extinguishing. And he actually even says that's a Rashi means too. It doesn't mean literally mechaba mamish. It means it could come to cause the kibuy, because you're going to be makarb the kibuy by lifting up the water when the sparks are coming out. And because of that, we said even on erev Shabbos, you're not allowed to do that, which Mepharshim talk about. So why don't we say that by everything that you start from before Shabbos? But here they're more concerned for such a thing, and therefore that's why no, it's not even gram kibuy. It's even according to the Rabbanan, because you might come to directly extinguish the sparks. So therefore, they were made a gzeira on erev Shabbos that you can't put the water in, because if you come to do that on Shabbos, you might come to literally be machaba. Hanulach Kira shall return to you the third parak of Masechta Shabbos parak Kira, which spoke about the first time spoke about the laws of bishul, which is what a kira is. It was stove, one of the ovens. He spoke about a tanner, a kira, and a kupach, which are these types of ovens regarding the laws of shia and bishul. And the second time spoke about the laws of muktzah. So ner chadish, ner yashin, muktzah mechamas means all these different types of muktzah. And with that, we begin the fourth parak of Masechta Shabbos, parak bamed taimnin, which, like the title of the parak, which are the opening words, talks about the laws of hatmana, of insulating. Which, as we said in the introduction, there's two types of insulating. There's what's called the moisiv havel, which increases the heat as it's insulated, and then something only that maintains the heat. Like when you have that thermos, it's not moisiv havel. It's only contains heat. Actually, we'll discuss it possibly if that's even a problem at all. But there's two types. There's insulating, that it just maintains the heat, and then there's also increasing the heat. So that's our mission to discuss is bamed taimnin, and the halacha is like this Mishnah. With what can you insulate? And what can you not insulate? Like Rashi comes to explain. He says, when you come to remove the pot from the stove, Erev Shabbos, and you're coming to insulate in something else. So the sages said, we said this on the Flamadal Mabeis, that you cannot insulate it in something that's Meisav Hevel. If you're wrapping in something that's going to increase the heat over Shabbos, that you can't do. Why? So we explained it with it because you might come to insulate it in Remetz, which Remetz has some fiery ashes over there. And then you might be machata in that, which you might come to do with Issa Dereis on Shabbos. So we said, no, you can't insulate something that increases heat because of a different thing that increases heat, which then you really might come to have a problem. So anything that increases heat, they said, you cannot insulate with that. Only with something that maintains the heat. So that's what the Mishnah is coming to say when it says, Vame ein taimnin, what's something that increases the heat that's going to be forbidden? And there's a whole discussion in Taisus regarding what type of food are we talking about. If it's, Rabbeinu Tam differentiates between the laws of Shehiyah and Atmana. Says most definitely you're allowed to do shehiyah as Taisus rules that Rashi does if it's already a third cook, like Michael ben Drasai, because since it's already cooked, the third cook, a little bit of stoking the coal is not going to be so significant to help it. But he says regarding hatmanam, which you're doing for the next day, that's why you're wrapping it for the next day. So maybe even a little chitu might help it, and therefore there actually would be any type of food, says Taisus, unlike the law of Shia that we opened up the last parak. We would make the gzeira by anything that's meisav havel, that you might be meremetz and you might be mechata. So unlike he brings from the Rabbeinu Shmuel that would say it should have the same status as that of Shia. No, anything, you cannot wrap any type of food, it'll help till you get to the next day, and therefore you cannot wrap it in something that increases heat. What is something that increases heat? So that says the Mishnah, ein taimnin, you cannot insulate. And now the Mishnah just talks about many different cases of that are meisav havel, like begefes, not with mark, which that's the pulp of the refuse, the leftovers from the olive press. You have the different pieces left over, which are gathered together, and that increases heat. You can't wrap it in that. V'loi bezevel, not with manure. V'loi b'melch, not with salt. So that's if you're totally submerging the pot in these elements. Although there's no fire over here, but they increase heat. You can't insulate in them Erev Shabbos. V'loi besid, not with lime. V'loi b'chol, not with sand. And now, to qualify these elements, they're bein lachen, whether they're moist. Now, things that are these types of elements that are moist increase more heat than when they're dry. So here, these things, you cannot wrap it in these things, whether they're moist, bein yavation, or even if they're dry, they're still going to increase the heat. Now, that's one category. Then a different category is v'loi b'teva, not with straw, v'loi b'zagin, not with grape skins, which that's the refuse from the wine press, v'loi b'meichin, not with meichin. Meichin is anything that's soft is called meichin. So, for example, cotton, or let's say the pluckings of some soft wool from the animal, or like a shmata from a worn-out garment. And v'lei basavim, you cannot wrap it in grass. Now, these things are only bisman shein lachen. When they're wet, these things, if you immerse it in them, you insulate it, then they're going to increase heat. But you could insulate in these things when they're dry. When they're dry, they don't increase heat. Now, by the way, the following question, that's going to be the last discussion on this stuff. Gefes shel zeisin tanan, when we spoke about gefes, so gefes basically means the leftovers, the pulp. Which pulp were we talking about? Gefes shel zeisin tanan, was it the pulp of the leftovers from olives? That's what increases heat, and that you can't use. But the pulp of, let's say, both of them, they're gefes because they would use it to squeeze out the oils. So you make sesame oil, and you also make olive oil. So the question is the leftovers of, what do we mean? Do we mean that of olives? That increases heat, that they're very intense? Or is it talking about, but sesame seed, the leftover pulps of the sesame would be okay? Like, no, the gef is talking about that of sesames, but and for sure that of olives, which have more heat, would be forbidden. So let's bring a raya, because Rabbi Zera said the name of one of the students of the Yeshiva Rabbi Yanai. Kupa should tamen a box that someone insulated in. In other words, you put inside, let's say, cotton, and you insulate a pot over there. Now, that's what we said when it's dry, that's not meisav havel. So you put it into a box with cotton, and you insulate it over there. So on that said, said Reb Zera, Asla nicha al gefesh shel zeisim. Now this insulated pat that's in the cotton, you cannot put it on this pulp of olives. Shma mina, you see shel zeisim not. You see what increases heat, and that's going to be asr as meisav havel is only that of olives. He doesn't say al gefesh shel shumshmin. So the Gemara, no, lo ilam emloch. Truthfully, I'll tell you that le'inyan hatmana. See, this case is different. It's an interesting type of a case. Here, what you did was you insulated something a pot in something that's not Meisav Hevel, but it's insulated. It's in this cotton that's dry. We said that only when it's wet it's Meisav Hevel. It's dry. Now we said you cannot put it on top of Gefer Shel Zaysim, which does increase heat. So it's interesting. What you're having over here in this case is that you're insulating, you have both things. It's insulated and it has something that's Meisav Hevel. But says the Gemara, no, it's not the same thing as the case of our Mishnah. Truthfully, I would tell you, to insulate inside of the gefes, if you're totally submerging something in the gefes, the shumshim and nami aser. No, sesame seeds, they increase heat, and it would be forbidden. But this case is different. Asuki havla, regarding elevating heat, like this case, like we said, that you insulate in something else, in the cotton. But then you put the box on the gefes, where all you have from the gefes is that it's sending up the steam, the heat upwards, and it's going to heat the pot that's in that box. The zaysim maski havla, only olives are so hot that then it's going to heat the wrapped thing on top of it. That's forbidden. The shumshim in loy maski havla, the sesame seed is not going to increase the heat, but that's different. Those are two different cases. One case is that if, let's say here, this thing was wrapped in cotton, and this was beneath it only, so it's going to increase the heat, but it's not what you insulated in that's heating it, but then you'll have it's insulated, and it's something that's Meisav Hevel. Shumshimin is not going to, when it's on the bottom, be enough to heat the thing that it's insulated in. But if you totally submerge it in sesame seeds, it would be considered that it's matmin b'davar ha'Meisav Hevel. Which Tais has some interesting discussions over here. He says that from here it should be forbidden, the way the last case the Gemara just described, to put a pot, to put coals beneath a pot. Even if you put ashes on them, which that's like a blech, like we said, that's garfukotim, you shouldn't be able to insulate the pot on top of them, because the coals on the bottom are going to be mal hevel, like the Gefer Shel Zaysim. And Tosfos wonders, he says, how do we go ahead in Tosfos times? He says they had this shiur called ashtera, that he says, although we garif it, that we shovel out the coals, but it still increases heat, like Gefer Shel Zaysim, and it's insulated. So the Ri says, to resolve the minig, he says, no, the difference is, and just an important concept to understand, we'll have some, and there's some alumnus in the Sugya Fatmana. By Gefes, there's a concern that you also might come to submerge it inside of it, because it's underneath it. But by our ovens, there's no such concern. You can't push it into what's beneath it, and therefore that's why it's not going to have a problem. Another important halacha that Tosfos says is that some make this large pit, and they make with bricks around it on all sides and on the bottom, and they heat up very much, and then they shovel it out. And then they insulate a pot inside of it. So he says, how's that permitted? Why is that? He says, no, that's not the same thing as matmim davar meisav hevel, because hatmana, insulating something, was only when you fully surround something all around the thing, touching the actual pot, which is similar to remetz, which was the whole concern of like, if it might be in these hot coals. But an oven, or this pit, where there's space between the walls and the pot, then that's not more usher than shehiyah, even though the whole pot is inside the oven, but it has to be totally insulated and touching the walls of the pot. This comes up in Psak Halach a lot regarding what's considered hatmana or not. If it's not fully surrounding it, even though it's all around it, but if it's not touching the actual walls, that wouldn't be a problem of hatmana. Some of this we spoke about in today's daf, and Shabbos Daf Mem Zayin, was we continue with the theme of basis, which we had discussed in the previous daf regarding being a base, l'davar ha'aser, which that makes it muktzah, just by being a base. So we brought the following story, that Rebbe permitted to move a pan bi'afara. Now, the assumption of the Gemara originally is that, what does that mean? What's the chiddush? That since the pan is a kli, so even though it's with ashes, which is muktzah, because it has no utility, still he let me move the pan. On that the Gemara says, how could you say that? This was Rabbi Yochanan who said over this teaching. But Rabbi Yochanan himself said that if you have a basket, that it's going to be muktzah if it has a stone in it. He says the only way it's permitted is only with peiros. So it is He holds that a basas l'davar aser is forbidden. So how could he say that Rebbe permitted to move a pan with the ashes, which would make it a basas l'davar aser? He himself says that the basket with the stone is muktzah. So the Gemara explains, no. This pan had also some kratin of levina. Oh, so it's exactly like the basket with the stone and with the fruits inside of it. Therefore, it's permitted because that's what we call a basas l'davar ha'aser viha mutter. Which that is actually in halacha permitted to move, if at least it's significant, the mutter thing. But then the Gemara says you can't say that because this story was in the household of Rebbe. And by him, it's not significant, the krot. It can't be considered even the basas to that davar mutter. So it's only basas davar aser. We're back to the question. And like we said, like the garments of the poor people are not considered significant for wealthy. Even so, for a pauper, which the krot would be significant, that can't make it significant in the household of Rebbe. That was one approach. The second approach, the Gemara says you can't say. You can't say it's permitted because of gras shalrei, because it's different. Although you're allowed to take out something that's filthy, that's the heter. People have to take out garbages. What's the heter? It's muktzah. And actually, it's not so simple. Some things people do with garbage. But it's a gras shalrei. It's disgusting. It's smelly. You got that dirty diaper. You're taking it out. But that's not the same thing over here. First of all, it's not disgusting, and here it's covered, so it won't qualify as a gras shalrei. So the Gemara concludes the third approach is that you know what it means machta ba'afara? It's the opposite of what we thought. It's because of the ashes, which means that we thought before Shabbos we want this pan with the ashes because they wanted to cover the spit and the excrement. So the chiddush is, so what's the chiddush then? Of course not muktzah. No, even though there were broken pieces of wood over there, but that's what we said is the qualification of the heter that you're allowed to move something that's a basas v'davar aser v'hamutter. That makes it permitted, and actually, it's when he says ba'afaru was because of the ashes. That's what made it aser, because the basas davar mutter. But you're right. If the davar aser is more chashiv, like in the Galil, where their oil was insignificant, so then the broken wick actually made it the primary, and there was going to be a basas, it's going to be muktzah, because it's only considered basas l'davar aser. The davar mutter is not going to make, and this comes up the big discussion regarding the leichter. It's a basas for the flame. Person puts on their tehillim, their whatever they're putting on. So that comes into halachic discussion regarding, well, does that make a basas davar aser mutter, which would be permitted, but which one? But is it really significant? That's the discussion that comes up regarding this halacha. Then we had a different discussion going back to a previous daf regarding are you allowed to put back, reassemble this IKEA bed, this mita shel tarsium. This bed is permitted, which is meant to be reassembled every day. They put it back together. Is that permitted now? So, one opinion says it's mutter, as the Gemara ultimately explains it, because if it's loose, so then it's even mutter ketchila. And that's like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg that we have a Tanoic support. Then there's a different opinion that was brought Rabbi Shmuel, which they also have a Tanoic opinion that supports them. It says no, you can mechayev v'chatas if you put in tightly, and therefore even if you put it loosely, they hold it's aser. We brought many different cases. We brought a menorah, brought the one who makes the lime, and he all those different cases regarding how that relates to this halacha, if you're allowed to reassemble or not. Then we went to the next mission that says that you could put a kli tachas in there to accept the nitzaitzis, but not with water. Now, this is permitted, as we said in the previous daf, nitzaitzis, because in ben mamish, not being involved with kli machame. Now, why can't you put the water? So, interestingly, even Rabbi Yasi, who holds gram kibbutz aser, should not hold it's forbidden, because even Erev Shabbos, he holds gram kibbutz only aser on Shabbos. No, it's actually even like Drabanan. Forget about Rabbi Yasi, even like Drabanan, because it's not only gram kibbutz, it's actually explicitly putting it out. Which I had a machlekes Rashi. Taisa makes the more obvious way of like, because you're going to come to pick it up, and you can actually be extinguishing, and therefore they made the gzera that you can't even have the water in there from before Shabbos, because then you might come to do it on Shabbos, and therefore that's going to be forbidden. Hadnulach Parakira, as you can see, as 1 o'clock in the morning, I was very excited, finishing Parakira, and then we started Parak B'Metaimna, which is that one's not allowed to insulate an Erev Shabbos, but davar ha moisev havel. If it increases heat, that's forbidden to be done. And we said that the truth is, you could even say that the gefes of shumshimin is also going to be us as moisev havel. We brought a story that was said that when you had it in a box, and so it was insulated, that you're not allowed to put it only on gefes shel zeisim, because that's different. When you have it in the thing itself, it's insulating and it's increasing the heat. Shumshimin has enough heat to do that. But it's not enough of a moisev havel that when you're insulating something else, and putting this as a source of heat beneath it, that would only be by the really hot zaysim, but shumshim wouldn't do that, and therefore it doesn't contradict that. You could say that, but the gefes of the shumshim in itself, if he insulated it, would be forbidden because that would be considered meisav helo. Thank you to any time for hosting us.